White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki claimed that the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they're really considering executive action on gun control in response to not one, but two mass shootings that happened in the span of 1 week. Of course, the first being in Georgia in 3 different spas where women were murdered by a mass shooter, many of whom were of Asian descent. And then the shooting that unfortunately happened this week at a King Soopers grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. Now, for any of you who take what Press Secretary Jen Psaki has to say at face value, you should probably stop doing that because there is really no indication that there will be any executive action in response to calls for gun control. Let's start with Kamala Harris's incredibly awkward interview on this topic. Let's take a look.
The reality is you guys just don't have the votes. So what's your move?
Well, on the issue of gun violence, let's just be very clear. We are seeing tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. We are now learning the names of the 10 people in Colorado, including that police officer who ran into fire in terms of gunfire, a father of 7 children. We are looking at in Atlanta, and all of those folks all of them at the grocery store, in these establishments, going about their lives.
I know the personal stories are heartbreaking. The personal stories.
But Gail, here's why I mention it. Why I mention it.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you something. I've been working on this for a long time. I actually thought that Sandy Hook would have been the thing that moved Congress. When 26 and 7-year-old babies were slaughtered, and they did not act. It is time for Congress to act.
So she just finished saying that after Sandy Hook, where 20 children were slaughtered in this mass shooting, Congress did not act. And then she immediately pivots to Congress must now act. And the question really is, and you heard it in the beginning from Gail, you don't have the votes in the Senate where you need 60 senators to vote in favor of gun control legislation. You don't have the votes. So what's your tactic now? And really the question is, are you going to pursue, or is the Biden administration going to pursue executive action? And the answer is no. We have more evidence of that in just a second. But John, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I love that she could, like the thing that she said about Sandy Hook is totally true. I think a lot of people thought, well, that's too much, right? Like we can't have this. High school students could get totally shut up, but these are younger kids. That should be the thing. And then it didn't. And I don't know if everyone did this, but I started to wonder, okay, well, what about hypothetically, what if they shot up a couple of churches or a synagogue, and then you play that game and then you realize after a while, oh wait, no, there's nothing. There is nothing that would actually be like, Lauren Boebert would be like, it's gone too far. Something has to be done because these are not thinking rational human beings. And so you can acknowledge that, and you could use I just said that, but it can't lead you to then say, so let's try it again. Let's hope that some Republicans will be reasonable, or let's hope that Joe Manchin, who's like legally married to a pump action shotgun, that he'll be reasonable on this. Or like, it's not just the Republicans. Obviously the Republicans are the worst, but there's several Democrats that are only as slightly better. And when it comes to actually passing something, it's indistinguishable. They won't pass it. And so the answer then is, what are you gonna do that doesn't have anything to do with them? Unless what you're gonna do is get rid of the filibuster, which you're not gonna do. And even if you did do, I don't know if you'd be able to get this passed. So what is Biden gonna do? So Anna, what is Biden gonna do?
Biden is going to do nothing. We do have a video from Biden, which we'll get to in just a second, but we're not done with Vice President Harris yet. In the next clip, she is asked to just please answer the question about possible executive action. So let's take a look at what she had to say.
We heard from the head of Moms Demand Action earlier in the broadcast, who said the president has it in his power to do something right now.
And the president has said he is prepared to sign legislation.
But he can also take executive action.
I don't think the president is excluding that, but again, I want to be clear that if we really want something that is going to be lasting, we need to pass legislation.
No, the president is excluding that, though. The president is excluding that. His statement yesterday in response to the Boulder shooting made it abundantly clear that he's relying on Congress with this broken, filibuster-ridden Senate process to pass gun legislation. The thing is, they both know it's not gonna happen. They know that the filibuster is a problem. They both know it. They both know it because when it came to something as important as passing a $15 an hour minimum wage, they were not only running into a brick wall on the Senate filibuster, right? When it came to passing something through reconciliation, they weren't even willing to overrule the Senate parliamentarian who is not a democratically elected person and whose opinion doesn't really matter if the vice president decides to overrule. My point is, they're not willing to do what's necessary when it comes to the Senate filibuster, and they're not willing to take executive action. So with those two things in mind, how about don't do these interviews because you have nothing interesting to say? Okay, that goes for Harris and Biden on this particular topic. If your answer to the American people is we have the power to do executive action, but we're gonna sit on our butts and do absolutely nothing and wait for the Senate to fail as it usually does, I don't wanna hear about that. Don't care, it's not an interesting conversation to have. Okay, and you're not tricking anyone by going on a long diatribe about what happened during the shooting. We know what happened during the shooting. We know, we don't need you to recount it for us. We need to know if President Biden is gonna do his job and try to do something unilaterally because right now the Senate is broken. They're not gonna pass gun control. They're just not.
Well, Anna, he's gonna take strong action by signing something other people do. If they do it, we'll see if they do it. I'm not gonna lead or anything. No, of course not. But I'm saying like, that is not action. That is literally signing off on something someone else did. You're just signing, that's what you're doing. And let's say that in theory, okay, no executive action for some reason that they won't define, like they won't even say why they won't do that. But let's say they're not gonna do that. They're gonna wait for legislation. Okay, then if you're gonna come forward, as Anna said, you could fill the time better, not by telling us what happened with the shootings. We know what happened, that's why we're pissed. And now we're pissed at you because you're helping to block change. Instead, tell us all of what Biden and you are going to do to somehow force it to work, what you're gonna do to make Joe Manchin act right. Because if all you're doing is signing, and up until the signing, all you're doing is sort of sitting in the background and watching to see what happens, then you are the exact opposite of a leader. You're not even the leader the extent that some in the Senate would have to be for that to work. And on Harris in particular, it is now a couple of months into Biden's administration. He has done some really bad things, he's done some good things, but unless I'm wrong, and feel free to correct me, she was supposed to be better than him. He's from the 1880s Democrat. She's more progressive, younger and all that. Do we have an example of anything that she has made him better on? Some influence that she has exerted that has put him better in line with the current state of the Democratic Party? Like presenting her to do interviews is fine, but if all of this next 4 years is gonna be her holding the spot so that she could run for president someday too, isn't she at some point gonna have to demonstrate how her being there was better than Buttigieg or Klobuchar or whatever?
No, I don't think she has to demonstrate anything because the second you have I mean, I'm sure we'll see it in the comment sections of this video. The second you try to speak truth to power to Kamala Harris specifically, they'll come for you with all sorts of allegations that weaponizes identity, and it's absolutely disgusting. And look, to be fair to Kamala Harris, she's not the president, okay? Kamala Harris and the vice presidential role in particular, I don't want to say that it's a useless role. It's not useless. She had a tremendous amount of power in overruling the Senate parliamentarian should she have chosen to do that. And as the tie-breaking vote in the Senate, she does have power. But in terms of executive action, the only person who can do that is Joe Biden. And since I promised you, what did Joe Biden have to say?
I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future, and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country once again. The United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the 2 House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system.
Anna,
it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
He said, the US Senate, and I hope some are listening. What do you mean you hope some are listening? You're the president. You're the president of the party that's in charge. Make them listen. Quite literally, like, get on the phone with them. Don't hope that they watch this address, but then also use pressure. And I understand. I have no misconceptions about Kamala Harris being able to pass executive actions on her own, but she's in the room with him. She's supposed to be influential. Vice presidents have been in the past influential. Dick Cheney was influential. He had no on the books more power than Al Gore did, but he was very influential. She could be that. She could be advising him. I'm sure that she is. I just wonder what the advice actually is. For him to say, I hope they listen. It's time now to pass the legislation. That is what they have said over and over and over. And the only thing that has changed is the number of people who've been shot and killed. That's it.
And look, let me also be clear about one other thing, because there are statements or parts of Kamala Harris's statement that are true. So for instance, in a perfect world, which we don't live in, you would pass the legislation through Congress and get it signed by the president, because that is far more difficult to reverse than passing some sort of gun control through executive orders. As we know, an executive order can very easily be reversed in an upcoming Republican administration. So I agree that the best, in an ideal world, that would be the best option. But the problem is, under the way that the Senate is structured right now, with that legislative filibuster that ensures that you need 60 senators to vote in favor of that legislation, it ain't gonna happen, okay? In fact, it would be a heavy lift even if they did away with the filibuster, because unfortunately you have conservative Democrats like Senator Manchin saying that he's against passing the House version of gun control, which calls for closing the gun show loophole, which calls for universal background checks, and all the things that we've been talking about, not just throughout this week, but for years, literally for years, as mass shootings have become more and more common. The rate of mass shootings have increased in the United States. But the one other thing I want to bring up is, I want these lawmakers to stop treating us like we're stupid, right? Because we know that it can't pass through the Senate with how the Senate is structured now. And then you have like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's like, oh, I'm gonna bring it up for a vote. You betcha, I'm gonna bring it up to a vote. Knowing that it's gonna fail, this is what we know. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for his part, vowed to address the epidemic of gun violence, noting that he has already committed to bringing universal background checks legislation to the floor of the Senate. That's all fine and dandy. You can go ahead and do that, but he knows it's gonna fail. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden know it's gonna fail. So how about we address what the heart of the problem is here and what makes the Senate ineffective, essentially useless in passing the legislation that we need, and that's the legislative filibuster. That is gonna be a problem throughout this entire presidency. And the idea that they think we're stupid enough to believe that, it's really not the executive branch's responsibility here. They're just gonna wait for Congress to fail again on this is insulting, ridiculous, and I can't stand it. So that's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, no, and I get that you're frustrated that literally nothing is happening in the legislature, but that is the price of not angering Mitch McConnell, and then his retribution would be for literally nothing to happen.
Yeah, well, let me just give you a statement from Mitch McConnell. We'll wrap this story up because he has put out additional threats about democracy. Like, if you nuke the filibuster, we might have democracy in the Senate. We can't have that. So here's a recent statement that he made during the Ruthless podcast, some conservative podcast. He said, if they turn, meaning the Democrats, the Senate into a simple majority body, the Senate is lost. it may not be the panacea they anticipate it would be. It could turn the Senate into sort of a nuclear winter where the aftermath of the so-called nuclear option is not a sustainable place. I don't know about you guys. I believe in democracy. Okay, so I don't know like what those threats mean. I would venture to say they're empty threats. He's now pivoted to pointing to the fact that Democrats were in favor of the filibuster during Trump's term. Yeah, they were. It should be nuked. The filibuster in the Senate stops the passage of important legislation. We're supposed to live in a democracy. If you want to pass HR 1, if you want to, possibly pass the infrastructure bill, that's the upcoming bill from the Biden administration, there, is some indication they can pass that through reconciliation. But why do we have to go through like this second Plan B method? Let's just have a Senate that works, get rid of the filibuster. Otherwise, all these discussions we have about policy is useless. It's just useless. We're talking about unicorns and butterflies and rainbows. I'm not interested. I want to talk about what the reality is and what we can do to fix it.
Anna, it's fun to lie though. Like earlier today when Kristen Sinema tweeted that she believes it's important that we make women's pay equal to men's. And that's why she has legislation that she supports to make that happen. That will be filibustered, and then she won't do anything about it. It's just fun to lie sometimes.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.